This week on Revenue Uncoded, we talk with Arthur Koenig, Chief Technology Officer and friend of 25 plus years. He'll be talking about advances in technology as it relates to the BSS stack. Next on Revenue Uncoded.
So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls,
it's that time again.
Thank you for joining us on Revenue Uncoded.
Coded. And we have a very big surprise today. The one, the only Chief Technology Officer at Kansys, Mr. Arthur Koenig.
Welcome.
This is where you say, hello, welcome, thank you very much.
Well, hello. Good to be here. Excited to be on.
Just full disclosure to the audience that all three of us have been working together for longer than we probably care to admit, but at least
more than 2 decades.
At least 2 decades. You guys a little bit longer. Arthur, you and a lot of the core folks here were working 5 years, 10 years before that.
Correct.
Together, right?
Yes.
And how did that all start? Where did you guys all meet?
Gosh, that was a long time ago. We all met back in Kansas City at a company called EDS at the time. Yeah. They were purchased by HP and now So we worked, I worked for about 9 years at EDS supporting an AS400 hosted billing application called IX Plus. Yes.
Oh yeah, the IX Plus thing, yeah.
Joe just happened to be the billing expert.
Uh-huh.
I became kind of the rating expert, and
now didn't it all start with you on a client in Omaha?
Yeah,
a long time ago, where you had little children, and I think you were just starting out, and you were in the operations side.
I was a baby too,
and you were a baby. I was
only 20.
But for whatever happened is that everybody said, man, this one guy just not only finds the problem, but he corrects the problem immediately. And so you just kind of had this reputation from operations, and then you just started going up, right?
Yep.
In terms of development. A lot of people have said that Arthur Koenig has a photographic memory. I would agree with that. And Arthur has been, I'm just thinking about the war stories and all the stuff that we started building. Remember, we built an invoice rendering solution because one of the software, Transform, couldn't work because the system was inflexible.
Back in the day, there wasn't any kind of feature that allowed you to kind of create your invoice on the fly or create a template.
Right.
It all had to be hard-coded in, of all things, COBOL or RPG.
Oh, yeah.
And it was all fixed with, and remember all that kind of old stuff. So, Transform became
and it would cost the customer,
the WYSIWYG.
It would cost them $100,000 plus.
Yes.
To create a change on the invoice.
Change their logo.
Yeah, so that was all. So that was like laser cool, epiphany stuff way back then.
And it was XML based, and XML was hot at the time. Mm-hmm. It had just come out, and easy to edit, quick to change.
We have done well with XML, wouldn't you say? Yeah. In terms of just how we use it, whether it was on the Transform invoice rendering tool, or some of the metadata components of software architecture that we advocate, all those sorts of things.
The automation pieces of that, one of the secret sauces has always been, we've got a technology that works with the XML. You've got rendering engines. You've got ability to parse it. You've got structured data. It's like a little portable database that you can work with. The key is the tools aren't necessarily inherently useful in a business environment until you put, for what we're doing with billing, et cetera. Mm-hmm. That automation and the things that come out with it were stuff that we learned, like, well, I've got a file. Why is this file almost a half gig? It won't fit on my 486 processor PC. There's a little challenge with that. And and so those things that you learn with those, we'll call them exercises in troubleshooting, and how to automate around certain functions and features to me has always been one of the evolutionary things that we've done here, because we're like, oh, how can this possibly not work out? All we worked before. And then you found out that you've pushed to the edge of the envelope for the hardware or what the software can do, or the fact that it's, you really need a 32-bit operating system here. And now you've got a 64-bit, and you're like, so I got to chop the file up, and, just amazing little things that are the operational secret sauce that makes you efficient and able to solve customer-facing problems quickly, and then you're like, do it on a more efficient basis, so your costs come down.
It always does. It always does. I just think about this evolution, right? So whether it's XML on the rendering tool, or and we, for the audience, we grew up as a services company, right? Doing a lot of integration work, typically a lot of subcontracting work to other vendors that had great systems and took us all around the world and the country. And I wouldn't trade those experiences for anything. But then we had one opportunity, one software that we'd worked with on a subcontracting basis that inevitably we could call our own. And that's really when I saw you light the candle. I mean, you always lit the candle. You always worked hard, but you just I saw this passion. I saw this. This is now our multi-million line base of code that is powerful, that we can kind of change and do this, that, the other thing. So what have you done with that piece of software since we inherited it? Acquired it.
I mean, that was one of the exciting things about acquiring the product, I think, is because it gave us, as a consultant, there's only so much you can influence a product because it's not yours. Where there are things that when you're working in it day to day and you're, doing grunt work and stuff like that, there's usability issues. There's little things that you wish you could tweak or do something, but, the product companies rarely ever have time or address any of your, lower priority issues. They're always trying to fight fires. So once we acquired the product and I took over the R&D department, we really kind of switched to like a customer focus kind of approach, to where, as tickets or issues or anything came in, we would prioritize those over housekeeping stuff and stuff like that. Or, even, some of the new features we would delay because, if there's a usability issue or something not working or a performance issue or anything like that, we kind of did R&D, but we did it with a services approach over just a strictly product. So
not just a feature, but
yes.
But ergonomics, usability, interface,
holistic view,
better flows, better whatever, right?
And really just, taking advantage of all the feedback that you're getting from your support group and from your, customer base and stuff like that, and using that to drive what the R&D department really needs to be focused on, rather than, we got to implement this one feature, it's going to take us a year, things like that. Yeah. Now, since we've taken it over, technical debt is always an issue. So if, there's some internal things that we've been
question about that. I've heard technical debt for decades. I'll assume it's just legacy restrictions or lack of flexibility.
Bill, we could tell you, but we'd have to kill you. It's a secret thing that only developers understand.
Well, it's just, simply put, it's just the code that has to be replaced in a system that is either no longer going to be supported, by a vendor. For example, COM objects are a thing of the past. Some of these systems have been around for 20, 30 years. Those COM objects are deep down in that code, and it's very significant. It's a very significant effort to be able to have to update
to replace
that. You got to mine it out and then replace it and understand what it really was doing. So you have to learn the COM again because you haven't touched it in 18 years.
And it's all C++ machine code. It's not any of the traditional languages that we have now
in there. And you go, oh, and this is the thing that actually does this, and this.
All right. Well, thank you.
That's the technical.
Thank you for humoring the lowest common denominator there. Yeah. So technical debt, a big part of it, right?
Yes.
And so you got millions of lines of code. How you kind of reevaluate what's the wing walking exercise to kind of migrate to the newest, latest, and greatest. You've always been a Microsoft advocate.
Yes.
Right. So in terms of
Yes.
its ability to work with the entire suite. What? And let me backtrack. So why would you be a Microsoft advocate?
So
Go ahead. You can say it.
Microsoft is always, not that they've always been the first ones to get to do something, but they've always come in later in the game and done it the best way. You see what I mean? So they may not be the first one to market with whatever it is they're doing, but whatever they do come into the market with to compete with whatever is out there, it's always going to be top notch. It's always going to work. You're always going to have support. Where I feel like some of the things, not to knock Java or anything like that, because we do have Java and, I think it's a great language and everything like that. But the thing there is there are so many flavors that are there that you really have to pick one, kind of avenue that you're going to stick with. And then once you do that, you're kind of, you get put in a box, and then you have to use all those utilities for that particular flavor of what you're going to do. So like if you do Oracle Java, right, you got to use all the Oracle stuff. And it works really well with all the Oracle stuff. But if you want it to connect to SQL Server or something else, it's a little harder.
Got it.
So much.
Got it.
Yeah.
But
It's come a long ways, recently, so that, you don't have so many interoperability issues, but it's,
so maybe not first to market on everything, but always coming in with a really rich feature set that is always going to be supported, and it always kind of has a family of complementary functionalities, whether it's whether
software lifecycle management, what they do with their releases. So
and they
kind of what the roadmap is.
Yeah, and they've really kind of open sourced their technology too.
Oh,
so
I didn't know that.
It's you no longer, we can run .NET, the .NET framework on any system. Virtualization, containerization, and all that kind of stuff is a big deal now. So, yes, Kubernetes. I had to say Kubernetes for you.
Kubernetes. That's my buzzword for everybody out there.
Has no idea what it means.
I don't know what it means. No, I know what it means, but it's just like you had to have some. You better get some Kubernetes on there.
It's like ketchup for your fries. You got to have
exactly.
But Microsoft has gone a long way to where you don't have to pay high license fees. You don't have to pay their stuff.
Comparatively higher license fees. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where even SQL Server is now really competitive. All the SaaS offering, they have a huge array of cloud-based services that you can take advantage of, and it's really awesome that whatever you code in and you do a private cloud or something like that, it's what the amount of effort it takes to pick that up and deploy it to a cloud solution or something like that is minimal. So it's a lot easier to transport your code base over to different platforms and stuff like that, and which didn't used to be the case.
Now you just said open source. We were talking briefly before we jumped on here. The industry has a few open source options, the billing space options, right? And I've watched smaller companies, jump in, and they took the approach that I'm going to launch with an open source application, knowing that it may not necessarily grow with me. But what's been your experience with open source? Anything, in particular, billing applications would be double good, but just open source as a topic.
So, I mean, I'm a big advocate of open source. I think it's really important that collaboratively you can work with. It's a much larger brain trust that you can work with that works on the product, everything like that. So you get a lot of really great ideas. Sometimes that causes a little bit of paralysis and maybe a little bit of versioning issues, where people keep on trying to re-implement things in a different way. But for the most part, we take advantage of that. And Microsoft has their package process. There's tons of third-party packages out there that very well supported, very solid. We're looking at, we got mass transit, we've got, React, Redux, all those kind of things, those packages in there. And when you collaboratively work with somebody or with a product that's people all over the globe that are contributing to it. It's you come up with it's a much better product.
Is it safe? I mean, is it bereft with
Obviously, there's always some level of risk, but part of the process of using that third-party product, developing with it and doing everything like that, your code still goes through a review process so that you ensure that you don't have any issues.
Picture, all of these developers at 11 at night, all kind of working together, making sure it all works.
Open source usually comes with the source code, so there are no surprises. And I would be very leery of using an open source product that was only delivered in binaries. Then I would say,
because then it's almost not source. Then it's open binary. It's not really open.
Yeah.
So
it's not.
Your ability to go in and see every single thing within that, and as Arthur brought up before, the larger sized brain trust working on all that, you got a lot of different eyes looking at those packages, those open source deliverables that come out of there. So it's usually pretty well viewed by a lot of people. And then when you bring it into your shop or whatever version you're going to bring in, you've got a pretty good idea of how it's working, and it's being used. And there's a lot, if it's it's an active open source package, product, whatever you want to call it, you got a lot of people working on that.
Yeah.
And they're taking it's because it's something that everybody's using.
Yeah. And keep in mind also that, even with that many people several people working on it and everything like that, there's still a monitor, right? So there's still a facilitator / sponsor, right? And most of them, Microsoft sponsors a whole bunch of them. Oracle will sponsor a bunch of them. There are several major companies that are contributing to those open source products. So you feel like, and even if they're using, if the open source is available on GitHub or anything like that, I can guarantee you GitHub is sweeping through that code to make sure that there's nothing nefarious or malicious.
Well, when I think of open source in a specific case to our world, I think about when we were trying to look for an OCS solution, and we went out and scoured, and we found the price tags of OCSs, and after the cardiacs, because we would try to create a whole total solution, right? So we started really looking into open source, and we found a really great product. The challenge is that when you really need support with that, and you need it now,
it didn't fit what we needed.
The cost, at least in that instance, was almost 2 or 3 times the normal cost of what it would be for commercial software.
That's the trade-off of open source and freeware. Right? So you have to have expertise in-house that either needs to learn it or figure out how it works before you actually go to production or anything with it, because you're right. Those support, that's where they get you, right? The support licenses, the services contracts.
They do. Yes, they do. I remember that. Doing the math on it. Wow.
Yeah.
So now the next evolution, what we've talked about on pretty much all of our episodes, AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
ChatGPT.
I had to ChatGPT or whatever. So
deep learning, machine learning.
I see our associate, Mr. Tim, leveraging AI very well in a marketing capacity. But is AI, and you and I have had conversations about code generation tools that are AI based.
Yeah.
You hear about IBM laying off thousands of people based on AI technology advances. Where do you really see AI on a commercial grade? Let's just stay with BSS stack, the OSS stack. Do you really think AI can play a serious role in our world?
Yeah, I think it will definitely speed up the development process. A lot of the things that are usually considered grunt work, building out interfaces, building out classes, doing stuff like that, you can feed that into an AI program and it can spit out, millions of lines of code for you almost immediately. And keep in mind, we had it in the past. We had code generation tools that would automatically,
I remember that,
take in a database model or something like that and generate all the classes and everything. So that's kind of the, AI is just a new variation of that. Yeah.
Is it?
And but the cool thing about AI is that, they fed millions and millions of lines of code into there. So you're going to get, no matter, even the best programmer can make mistakes. That AI generation, very few human mistakes are going to come. So it's going to be, you're going to have less bugs. You're going to have better documented code, better standards to the code, right? Because when it kicks it out, it's all formatted impeccably. The thing is,
what's the downside?
The trade-off. So until, we've done a lot of analysis and we've looked at ChatGPT and a few other ones. You don't really want to, in order to get the full effect or the full feature set of what it can do, you got to feed it in your code. And a lot of people are very hesitant to upload their IP capital or their IP and everything into the cloud, into that ChatGPT cloud, because, once you load it up there, there's no telling where it's going to end up.
Does somebody have the vault for ChatGPT? Is there a company called ChatGPT?
Yeah, it's
and
AI.
They've just own all this stuff, and they're just sitting back there.
Well, they don't own any of it. That's the thing. That's the interesting. And I don't want to get into legal issues or anything like that. But people kind of raise eyebrows when they're like, okay, well, all those, when you fed all that information, where did you get all that information from? And oh yeah, we combed through all the open source code on GitHub, and we're like, what? You did what? Did you tell anybody you were going to do that? Because I think people would have.
May not pass a legal test.
You probably should have opted in. You get at least given them the opportunity to opt in or out.
Yeah. Before
you just kind of swept through their code, and things like that. So there's still some legal, stuff going on there.
People want to kind of own that property, that intellectual property.
Well, there's no law on that really yet, so it's going to be
the legal system hasn't caught up to what AI is doing yet. So
you can do it.
Ethical issues.
Someone's going to ruin the fun, aren't they?
It's all going to be Skynet.
Well, once it comes down, once the lawyers get a hold of it, it takes all the fun out of it. But the newer versions of ChatGPT and the paid versions actually allow you to install a private instance, like in your environment. So you can, so that way that information doesn't go outside of your organization. So in that case, when you feed that code into the system, it does several things. It recommends things that it could do better. I just recently came back from our corporate seminar that we did, and believe it or not, AI was one of the topics for the R&D group, and people are even using it for, where there's legacy code or older code bases that there's really no expertise there anymore. They can load that into that AI system, and it will actually tell them, well, here's what it was really meant to do.
That technical debt thing we were talking about.
Yeah.
Where you throw that into the system.
So I did that stuff by hand years ago. Oh,
yeah.
How irritating.
But it's definitely going to change everything. So, and all of, developers are going to have to retool, with each new, major milestone that comes out. So, what we call a developer today, I don't think in 5 or 10 years that it's going to be
the same thing.
No, a developer.
What do you think it's going to evolve into? Just an interpreter?
AI a lot of the stuff the computer will do it much better.
Yeah.
Than everything you mentioned there, like formatting, comments, documentation, all the things that as a developer, you're like, I know that. I'll get to that a little bit later. You have to be judicious about making sure your code is documented, it's checked in. This thing does all of that for you. And let's say you've got some sort of interface you're putting up that has 200 params to it. Well, that just sucks to do that by parameters, interface points, maybe things that offsets, things that you want to learn, document as you're doing it. What can you call here? This can do it at a much exponentially connected level than what any human brain can do. So as it gets smarter, it gets smarter. You get better documentation and better code out of it, better responses, and the more it learns, which is sometimes I'm just shocked that when you say you can just ask it to do this and give me C# code for that, there it goes and it runs, and you're like, huh. Well, that's pretty amazing.
It's extremely well formed.
It's amazing.
Best practices, all the.
So let's talk about the developer in 5 years. What are they going to look like? What's their job really going to be?
Well, they're
just business requirements, defining them, listening.
They're going to be a TV screen.
The developer is going to be more of an innovator. They're going to be doing more proof of concepts. They're going to be doing more
architectural thought.
Solving bigger problems where some of the problems that AI really helps with documentation and generating classes and doing all that kind of stuff. That's all going to become, automatically done for you. So you don't have to do it anymore, which I'm not saying you don't have to learn that stuff and learn how to do it. It's still important to know what the basics
business
are.
Analysts.
Well, but imagine what you've got.
There's a greater
but
element
even
of
business analysts are doing. They're doing what development was called 20 years ago. BAs are doing that now.
Now, yeah. Because the software has a whole level of functionality on top of it that even the developers, quote, developer interacts with as opposed to what it was 20 years ago. I mean, the idea of having to sit down and physically use a Fortran form to lay out our COBOL and do your pickaxe and statements and you're formatting everything like this. It's
You're
like
really dating yourself.
That's just well, I know. But
hey, I did the card thing, man, in college. So
I did.
That's a date.
Yeah,
I didn't even do that.
I did that. And if you ever got hit by a big thing of wind and your card deck blew away, you lost your program. You had to start over.
I never had to do cards.
It was terrible.
Man.
But no, all I'm just saying is that those evolutionary steps from back in the days when real developers used paper and codes and we had chat issues, we would do that. But now you've got each step obfuscates those detail levels.
It's a nice word, by the way.
Well, thank you very much.
Big word.
I got it from ChatGPT. So that keeps moving that out. So think of today where you've got a 24/7 development group. Well, now the computer's going to be doing a lot of that. What used to be done, you're meeting, how far did we get on our next deliverable groups? We're handing it off to the overnight group, and then you come up and you sync up again in the morning. It's like, wow, those developers, do you need that? That's the piece that, in my mind, is one of the first ones to kind of be refactored in how you develop and manage your development life cycle.
Well, I'm intrigued now, but the 5 year from now developer going to be more of an innovator. So what you said. So innovation in terms of looking at the software code, marrying the business need, and trying to say it's evolutionary over here on the business side. It wants to do this, that, the other thing, and then just being able to kind of interpret the business incremental opportunity and kind of feeding it into the animal that is the AI.
And how do you feed the animal? That's the thing. It's like, what do you say to your animal to get it to your factory that you're going to use here to get it to deliver what you're thinking in your head that you want to have delivered out of that? And the architecture to how this AI engine will deliver something. You're not going to control each little piece of that anymore. You're going to say, I'm starting here with this box of these 7 parts, and I want it to come out, and it needs to look like a transformer at the end. Okay? So how do I ask my developmental engine to generate these pieces into this thing? And those are questions, and that's how to iteratively make those changes. So your development life cycle is totally different.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the microwave. You just put it into the microwave, make it, and then we take it out. And then the real objective is, how do I plug it back in to what the environment is, right? So if I get the goodness that comes out of this engine, how do I plug it back in, right? So that's the developer of tomorrow, is interpretive and kind of directing it, and then getting this magic bullet and then plugging it back into the frame.
How do you work?
I think it's actually going to be more than that, because I think, the developer of tomorrow is going to be, okay, how do I incorporate AI into my application, right? How do I get, what can I what kind of AI can I put in there so that it would make the user interface better, where the user doesn't necessarily know what they want, but they can ask it, and then it would just prompt them for a series of questions, and then kind of say, oh, you need to go here and fill this out and here, and then ask you questions and then do it all for you. I think that's where the developer of tomorrow is going to end up, incorporating AI into all the business applications that we support today.
Certainly from that BSS side of that.
And OSS, right?
Yeah. Well, OSS, we haven't really talked a lot about on that one. We did on the BSS with contact centers, the CRM, and how those scripts and things were now, when you incorporate that in, you've got information available to you with multiple feeds coming in that can be tailored and pre-processed with AI intelligence to make the screen be the most dynamic and pertinent data possible. So when you take that and go to the OSS side now, instead of worrying about like, well, am I out of memory on this or this? I mean, where do you see the OSS stack side of this thing evolving with AI?
They're already implementing AI solutions in the OSS stack to monitor and adjust and anticipate
AI knock now.
Anticipate capacity and be able to automatically think about it. Well, this circuit's saturated 90% of the time over the last week. Okay, well, I'm just going to submit a ticket and we're going to increase that circuit, or we're going to do that. That AI is going to be doing that, where in the past it would have to become a problem.
Yeah.
And then you'd get a ticket and then you'd have a technician look at it and everything like that. Well, the AI just did it in a matter of seconds.
Yeah. And it's constantly monitoring so many more parameters, being proactive. Like I've got nodes that aren't working correctly on my network. I've got a high level of jitter or whatever you're monitoring.
Or if you have a node, it detects a node goes down and then it automatically updates all the routing tables to redirect all the traffic. And then the users don't even realize it.
Never even see it.
Yeah.
And then if you need to roll a truck, that can all come out too. And there's just a lot of steps that aren't manual anymore.
And then some of the other things is like you get new components or new pieces of hardware on the system. AI can go out there and interrogate it and say, oh, I'm going to need to implement this and this and this. And, it's kind of does a learning kind of thing. So as soon as you connect something to the network, it's like, oh, it automatically configures everything and then notifies the appropriate systems that, I need.
So your virtualization now, your nodes, modules, and servers that are dynamic and virtually dispatchable now. You've got so I need 12 more CPUs, or I need 5 more service nodes spun up.
And I think eventually AI will do it for you.
Yeah. So you don't have to make that decision manually anymore.
Yeah.
Because the technology allows you to be very dynamic until the limit of whatever your sphere is you're working in, or whatever technology you're set up with. So that means it's not a manual process anymore. It certainly makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like Kubernetes for you.
Well, I keep going back to HAL.
Yeah, HAL.
I'm not going to close the door, HAL. Yeah. No, remember 2001 Odyssey?
Yeah.
You're dating yourself, bad. That was 1969.
Well, I do that every day.
It's a great movie.
Very well. So, all right. So that's a lot of great stuff on AI. Let me just shift back to you for a question, friend. Database work, creating APIs, solution architecture, developing user interfaces. What's your favorite? What's your favorite stuff? Because you've done all that.
I still go back to I enjoy the heavy lifting and creating the APIs in the back end for the UX people. I enjoy the design work of the UX and stuff like that. Coding it,
not your mojo.
It takes a special type of person to kind of look at that and see what's visually appealing. Because what looks good to me may not look good to the next person, and I am
There's
not.
A lot of judges. You're always never going to please everybody.
The visual is so different than the heavy lift. Because if you're like, I can make it do what I want,
The heavy lifting,
Does it
it's
look
black and white.
good? Does it, like I've answered the question. Here's the data. And like, well, yeah, it needs to spin here.
There's a little bit of an artistic aspect to UX.
Yeah.
And I don't have that gene. So
And it's even more and more present than what it used to be because the presentation components have much more power to them and flexibility that I'm totally with you on this. I'm like, I can do this, but I don't make me ask to make it look good.
And they have so many more so many more tools that make things faster and make things work better.
Until I don't.
React and Redux and things like that have interfaces, but it requires there's a learning curve to all of that, Angular, all that kind of stuff, where I'm just strictly JavaScript guy. I mean, give me a function-based programming language and let me go. Putting all these different layers and everything in there, it just, to me, it makes it super complicated. And the thing is it's supposed to make it easier to use, but I don't know. In my experience, it's like, I just want to present some data on a page. Why is it so hard?
Here to there.
Yeah.
So
I've got a line printer with green bar paper. Why do you need more than that?
Yeah.
Get your highlighter out.
So the evolutions of APIs, right? When I remember a lot of vendors used to have proprietary, non-open APIs.
Yeah,
Then we
they were
became open,
socket-based,
right?
yeah.
And then you had REST APIs, and then you got SOAP APIs.
No, SOAP was first.
Oh, sorry, reverse that. So that's the evolution of the API, and I don't want to go back and spend too much
And
on
think
AI.
about all the flavors that came out.
But is AI going to change APIs as well?
I don't think it's going to change the API, but AI is going to be able to go out and interrogate an API and then kind of tell you in layman's terms what you need to do.
Because today you have to kind of do that on your own as you're architecting what you want to do with API here, one over there, and then you go, oh, well, this does this does this. My end goal was to go do this. So you do that process, whereas now if you've got the AI says, well, here's everything that's available from this group of APIs or this particular one or what have you, and I want to format to come out like this, I don't have to type I don't have to write any of that stuff anymore.
What AI will probably do is it will interrogate the API. You tell it, I want to create a customer. It'll go out and figure out what API it needs to call and everything like that, present you with, some sort of form that you need to fill out and say, okay, well, if you want to create a customer, this is the information that you're going to need. So you fill it out and you click OK, and it goes out and creates a customer. That's what AI is going to do.
So staying on APIs for just a little bit longer, right? So when I think of a BSS OSS stack, right, and the option A is you go with one vendor, telco in a box. All of their APIs should be, fairly, tightened up. They work extremely well because they're sharing information, kind of like an Apple, ecosystem, right? But when you kind of get into best of breed stacks and you're interfacing with 4 or 5 different vendors, each of them with multiple configurations, unique configurations on the other side, I've watched you over the years, continually have to kind of create APIs, do API development on the fly, right? For when you're putting together a whole new stack of, 24 different endpoints and integration points, right? So, is it an API work, right? You kind of start with maybe your standard, which is open, right? And it has all of this pieces of data available to it and how to call it. But you just continue to expand that API.
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah.
And you're continually kind of customizing it to every one of those new vendors.
Well, I wouldn't say customize so much as you're adding features to it. No longer do you, just the basic CRUD operations are not enough for an API anymore. A lot of times you need
Create,
to
read, update, and delete.
Yeah.
Just one.
And
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I think you're going to start seeing those APIs develop and provide more concierge type activities.
All right.
So doing a little bit more than just your basic, interfaces
And this
stuff
used
like
to
that.
kind of be the 80-20 rule, the initial, like let's use the telco in a box example. 80% of the functionality comes out of the box with it. The 20% are those enhancements to your APIs, the integration points that you bring in, because your network or your business model is specific to X, Y, or Z processes. So then with virtualization, the AI pieces, you're going to move to a 90-10 model. And then you probably higher than that later on, where how you build in those new integration points it will be done differently, like we were kind of talking about the AI world. But because of the virtualization, you're able to be more flexible and include more options, if you will, with your initial deployments on this, because it's more flexible than it used to be for how you can overload or rebuild or refactor your APIs and your data. And I think you're just going to see the canned functionality, and I don't want to say canned, I don't think it's the right way. The base functionality that you get will meet more of your business needs to start, because there's just more horsepower in the background that's meeting, that can interface with the virtualized and flexible back office. So you don't have to write as many custom things to integrate that. That uplift is coming from the lower level up, and you're seeing that now more available to people.
They call that the maturity level.
Yeah. So it's really making some inroads and strides in that ability. And then who knows, with this AI being able to have a billion test cases run on this on how to do it, you're like, well, this probably ought to work pretty well.
Well, I know I'm bouncing around a lot, so I got a couple, 3 questions. We're going to tie it back to BSS a little bit, if we could. You've worked with a lot of different billing systems, a lot, right? What's the
Ours is still the best.
What's the number one thing that when you are evaluating and you're looking at a BSS system, where's the first place you go? Is it the product catalog? Is it the rating engine? Is it what is it?
How flexible is the product catalog?
That's the number one thing.
That's the number one thing. If the product catalog is inflexible and rigid, move on.
Yeah, it's a linchpin of death for you, because it doesn't do anything you want. It's rigid and flexible.
If that's part of the system doesn't do what you need to do out of the box, you
got yourself a lot of work ahead of you.
Well, and you may not even be able to implement it, because if you come up with something that's completely off the wall, where it's not just a simple transaction or some sort of usage-based thing or anything like that, and you need to, if you need to do aggregate billing or, minimum usage kind of stuff, if that product catalog can't support that, then, building that in there is, becomes a significant, investment.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
Or you're basically throwing it away and writing a whole new one.
All right. So
or worse, you're right. You're creating your own little mini billing system so that you can feed the actual billing system. Which
so I'm going to bounce around again. So product catalog for the win, and I was expecting that. Now let's think about the build. The integration, the projects. All right. So everybody always kind of talks about requirements, and we've had a lot of conversations just about requirements, the thoroughness of them, right? Or the total, hey,
it's more than just having the requirements. It's ensuring that the requirements are clear, concise, and actually depict what the business really wants. I've seen several instances where we get a requirement list, and it's a hodgepodge of ideas that they would like to have, but there's no clear.
It's not all connected. It's not all
architecture is not connected.
It's not architected from a top down, and this is what the business is.
It's a wish list from every set of stakeholders.
It's basically the worst part of the worst business requirement one I've seen is where you're right. It's just basically you got this 400 requirements, and you got like 20. You got a list 20 different wish lists from 20 different departments, and they just kind of all threw it into one spreadsheet, and then okay, here's our requirements, and you're like, no, and it's important. There's a business aspect and a technical aspect, right? And you should never do anything in IT in a bubble. because, it's just destined to fail, because if you get a bunch of IT people in there and a bunch of technical people, they're gonna create something really cool and everything like that, but probably not going to meet the business need. And then if you have the business people do it, it's going to be a spreadsheet with a bunch of spaghetti code, and it's going to look scary.
No rhyme or reason, no connectivity,
and there's no,
and won't.
But you just do it manually each week, and you put it in.
So it's important to make sure that you have technical sponsors and business sponsors.
Absolutely.
When you're doing that, and one main person to kind of scour over all those requirements and make sure that
we talked about that before as well. There needs to be
an enterprise architect.
Enterprise architect, correct. And so,
without a doubt.
So, on a related question is, when you've seen projects over the last 30 years, we'll say 30. It's close to 30 now, isn't it? What's been the biggest cause of overruns or time or money? What's the biggest one?
Poor business requirements.
Dreadful business requirements.
Which one?
Dreadful.
But all right, but I've also heard us
one.
I've also heard us complain that sometimes we get 10,000 requirements in a spreadsheet, right? When we get an RFP and we look at that and all this kind of stuff. So is there a point of diminishing returns where there's too much definition?
Well, you can die by requirements gathering versus having that architectural view that you think is pragmatic for what the business goals are.
That's the thing.
In
my opinion, business requirements are never static, right? They're always evolving. You're always going through iterations of improvement in them. So what you start out with, as you go through that iterative process, and you go through, and this is where, Agile and, iterative development and all that kind of stuff come into play, is you had a list of business requirements. You kind of show them early on what we think it's going to look like, maybe with a proof of concept or something like that, or, a wire diagram, something. And then, the business unit can touch and feel it and say yes or no to it and things like that. And then what happens is when they look at that and they say, oh, okay, well, maybe that business requirement wasn't very clear. Let us go back and get a little bit more detail, or let us rewrite it so that it's a little bit clearer with what you want, because clearly the IT group that's trying to implement it didn't understand what the business unit.
Do you start with workflows in order to kind of definition workflows in order to build your business requirements, or vice versa?
But that certainly is a valid way to look at things. Was a workflow. What are you trying to do? Given any business goal, and then you. Sometimes you get these requirements that are almost mutually exclusive. We need to be able to do anything we need to do, but don't let us make a mistake. That's not a requirement, but you'll see that on
that's a law. That's a legal contract.
You see some of that kind of more on the RFP side of things, but we have literally had that handed to us before with those 2 line items in there. And you're like, okay, well, we're going to lock you out because that way you'll never make a mistake, but you can't do anything. So how do you solve that?
Well, all right. So I'm thinking back to specific experiences over our history, and where there was really no business requirements, right? And we can't say who, right? But very, very, very few business requirements. And you would have a discovery session, and you would have some representation from multiple functions. Well, we need to do this. This is what we want to sell. Ready, set, go. Right? And so that basically was it for the requirements, right? But so then that customer leaned on us a lot to say, well, if this is what your vision is, you probably should add this, or you should change this. You need to think about this. You need to think about this. You need to be thinking about that, right? So now that was just kind of a Wild West on the fly. So at the same time, when I think about, there's this phrase called cowboy coder. All right? Now, there's pluses and minuses to the cowboy coder, right? Is that you get things done quickly, boom, bang, boom, right? But then that may create technical debt
that you need to go back and
you'll have to clean up.
Fine.
Yeah. So it all gets down to how much money you have and how much time you have.
Never
No,
time to do it right, but always time to do it over,
Yes. Yeah.
usually.
So poor business requirements is usually your number one driver of, man, this is going to be a booger project.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to take this, that, the other.
And I think the next thing is making sure you have a strong technical project manager on the group. If you don't have that solid person in that kind of
Working as the liaison between
laying the ham,
between the customer and the development team.
Yeah. If you don't have a very strong presence there,
Things go sideways real quick.
Yeah.
There has to be that ongoing communication with them between all the stakeholders with those, because when you don't have that, invariably the first set of releases or deliverables come out, somebody's screaming about something's missing that was supposed to be in there, and like, did we not capture this? Where did this come from? So that's another risk without that strong oversight managerial piece on that from the technical, at that higher almost SI view, if you will, for a software development project.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Technical project managers should be really good at picking up on those kind of small changes and things like that, and creating tasks in the backlog so that they don't fall through the cracks.
Yep.
So where, sometimes the developer's too busy, they're too far in the weeds that they can't come up for air to kind of do that. So it's helpful to have, a technical project manager and, maybe even a couple of BAs on there that are capturing that information.
So let's think about the BSS OSS landscape. All right, we watched it for a while on the evolution.
It doesn't look anything like it did 10 years ago.
No, it's very, very different. Well, any kind of gut feel on where you think the space is going? The BSS OSS, whether it be for the telecom side or for the enterprise side?
I think smartphones were a fad.
But I mean, do you see more?
I think it's going to go. It's going to start evolving into that. It's going to mature into that predictive model, where prescriptive model, even where the predictive model is just where the system, the AI, and everything that's in the system is kind of telling you, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what we think is going to happen, in a week or 2 weeks. Here's what we think your cells are going to be. Here's the hardware that you need to replace, and all this other kind of stuff. I think it's already starting, but it's starting to go into like prescriptive, where the system will automatically start, like Skynet, will start kind of doing some of those, smaller tasks for you, where, procuring additional hardware or replacing hardware and stuff like that, where that system will just automatically handle that. And, the ordering will get done all automatically, and then it'll show up on the doorstep, and the technician will just walk in there and do it.
And you provisioning and stuff with eSIMs coming out now, the smart, some of those physical barriers are now no longer going to be there for walking through your.
Everything's going to be virtual
with the customer.
All virtual.
Yeah, all virtual.
More self-service to the end users and to the business analysts, and
the more you can push it down to the user, the better your profitability is. Because
you don't need
as many
like that.
And that's where I think AI is going to play a big part too. Is when you're sitting there chatting, or when you're talking to a support rep or something like that, you're probably going to be talking to a chatbot.
Yeah. And it's now to the point where that information and the ability to process what your questions are in relationship to whatever services that you've been buying, that ability to regurgitate good information back to you is pretty impressive from what I've seen so far. We've talked about that with the other folks on a couple other the podcasts with that, but it's quite impressive, and it's just going to do nothing but get better. And the more you virtualize your back office, and the more that's using that predictive and prescriptive model on that just allows you to be proactive. Man, the traditional world of you need a whole village of people looking at these different things to have a process work, it becomes more automated and managed virtually. At least that's kind of my 2 cents on that one.
And then from a technical aspect, I think in 5 or 10 years, I think everything's going to move to serverless architecture. You're not going to have VMs or anything like that, and everything's going to be software as a service.
So what about support? Is that going to also go AI?
For people that don't,
I'm thinking like level 1 and level 2 type support, that's usually kind of tied to the specific configuration.
get better. How many of those
customization.
tickets won't be able that will you be able to manage up front? So your system is smarter.
Yeah, I think as the AI develops, I think level 1 and level 2 will be completely automated.
Kind of fade into obscurity?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I'm a buyer, this all means this stuff should get cheaper.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, the cost of software going to need less people to kind of create it. It's going to need less people to support it. All of the infrastructure is basically virtual, although I am still of the opinion that public cloud is a lot more expensive than private cloud. Sorry.
Well, and then there's
no one's going to convince me of that otherwise.
Yeah, but if you move to a serverless cloud architecture, it's not.
All right.
No, because then if you can get to a cloud native software architecture that is serverless and
I apologize for a stupid question.
Serverless
what do you mean by
means
serverless?
You know how? Okay, so you're familiar with the virtual machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
The virtual machine has an operating system on it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have that installed first, and then you have to install third-party software, and then you can install your software.
Mm-hmm.
With a serverless architecture, what you're doing is you're essentially loading your code directly into the cloud, and it's running it for you.
All of those components are taken care of.
Yes.
Magically.
You don't.
Is that Kubernetes?
No, Kubernetes manages that.
I had to get it in
but
there.
That serverless. It's that microservice architecture, right?
Yes.
Where you don't need a full blown VM. You're just here's my chunk of code. Put it up in there. That code is auto configured, and it knows that it needs to connect to whatever databases or whatever other back end systems. But it's all handled by the cloud provider. So AWS has a model for it, Azure has a model for it, and they're starting to standardize so that you can easily pick your code base up and run on it.
Well, to me, all right, so I've been a little reluctant to embrace the cloud for a couple
it's
not on a B to C basis, but on a B to B basis. B to C is virtual storage for your personal stuff. It's all fantastic, right? But B to B, I've been a little reluctant. So what you just kind of shared with me with serverless does change some of my mindset. I might say, bless the cloud instead of something else.
And that's our cloud initiative right there. And we're trying to get to that. We're trying to get that serverless micro services level of architecture, so that most cost-effective opportunities. So many of our customers are wanting to be in the cloud, would prefer OpEx over CapEx.
Yep.
So that's where I see it's all going.
It depends a lot on a lot of variables, but yes, I think you're correct. They would prefer the OpEx, and they prefer the flexibility.
And that operate model, that once it goes serverless like that, you change the way you administer and look at those kind of processes. You're not doing that anymore. So instead of people wondering, do I have enough capacity on this server cluster or these things? It's like,
that's all the cloud figures it out.
It's just math. It's just level setting. It's just dispatching code and doing things. So the thinking to make that a serverless environment really seems like it's going to have a lot of benefit to it at the end of the day.
So again, lowest common denominator. That sounds fantastic, but it also kind of sounds a little. Here's a magic wand, and once you kind of develop it, it's just going to go like that. Well, I find that hard to believe. It's going to be iterations,
use a phone with a dial on it, and then you could do buttons, and now you can just talk into it. It still does the same thing in the background, but it's the way you interface with this. Yeah. So instead of you having to have, IT and tech people looking at different things and running a backup and seeing if the tape's there and stuff, if you can get those administrative points virtualized, so you have all the data points you need to make a decision, i.e., wow, AI is really good at doing that. I'm able to manage a process that used to be much more manual. even though maybe running a backup. Is there a tape there? Well, I've got an automatic tape backup system. I've got this. We do snapshots. It's now, and that's dated. And that
Yeah. We don't do
kind of
tapes
thought
anymore.
process. You don't do that.
We
You
do
just
cloud. We do
use
cloud.
You go. Why do I have to do all this crap and store tapes?
Tapes are unreliable.
And the data, the fire hose of data has made tapes like I need 2 terabytes per square inch of each tape in order to be able to store my database now. Whereas before, the evolution of our tape decks that we've had over the years has been phenomenally inefficient, expensive, and we'll call it what it is, a big PETA. Because, and then you go back about the time you need the tape, it turns out the drive doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Or it's dirty.
It's dirty. You've got to call in and get something else. So
Yeah, well, that's cool. So
Better.
So speaking of all of this next generation and where we're going, is there a version of software coming from your employer, Kansys, coming to a theater near you in the near time, in the future?
Yes. So we've taken an approach to where we're doing one component at a time. We're setting it up so that you can incrementally migrate to the cloud with our new cloud initiative. Everything's being built from the ground up using cloud native technology. So you don't have to worry about any kind of legacy code, no technical debt or anything like that in the background. Conceptually, it's all going to be the same functional feature set. There are some enhancements, performance improvements, and stuff like that we're doing along the way. But ultimately, yes, our cloud initiative is we've already released our first iteration of our REST API and our foundation. Our UX, our first beta version or our first version of our UX is coming out in third quarter. And then we'll have a preview in the fourth quarter of what our new cloud native pipeline is going to look like.
Nice.
And then next year we'll be tackling we'll be finishing up the pipeline in the first quarter, and then we'll be working through that the back end, the new billing aspect of it, where doing the invoicing and stuff like that. And I don't know how technical you want me to get, but
go for it, man. That's what we're here for.
The metadata driven technology, where it's evolving, where in the past there was scripting languages, that proprietary scripting languages that you could code in our platform that would allow you to do configuration. We're standardizing a lot of that into JavaScript and even a little bit of C#. For those that are a little more technical, they can still continue to do their own customizations, do all that kind of stuff. But in a cloud world, right, you don't have the ability to deploy traditional, machine code, right? So we've developed ways for you to code in the application so that you can do small custom procedures and custom functions that you can kind of develop them with our JavaScript interface to do certain tasks that don't come out of the box.
Cool.
That kind of thing. So all the functionality is still there. It's just that the technology we're using has been updated.
Good.
Where it needed to be done because some of that technology is,
Sounds like
being
Kubernetes to
deprecated.
me. No, I'm just joking. That's not true.
Yeah.
But that's very cool. That's very cool. Brian, I've been bouncing all around. You got some questions. I apologize for monopolizing.
no, not anymore, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks a
very
lot for
much
ruining
what
everything,
you
Bill.
did.
God.
Can't believe you. No, so cloud native, serverless technology moving forward.
REST API architecture.
REST APIs, JSON based,
Yes, all JSON based. Yep.
interoperability.
Auto discoverable. So you'll be able to, as you navigate through the API, what's really cool about it is it automatically gives you the links that you need to get the additional data. So like if I need I need to create a customer. Okay, well, here's what you need to do. Here's the data that you need to provide. And then when you request a customer, I say, I want customer 123. It'll send you the customer information, but it'll also send you all of the links associated with that. Okay, so here's the customer information, but if you want the products or the subscriptions, you go to this link. And if you want, limits and data and stuff like that for the, for information on a specific part of that customer, here's the link for that. And it's kind of that auto-discoverable feature where it gives you, it kind of gives you a breadcrumb trail of how to get all the data that you need out of the system, where before all you could rely on is the documentation, which we all know documentation is never
So it's like
up-to-date.
real, discoverable. It's real time. You can figure things out. And when you go to use your, both as a user or a developer, you have a much richer set of information available to you. And instead of you having to go back and go, where's the document on the product catalog edition set that you're going to do on this? It's like, well, the link's right here. I can go in and access it and see this right now, which is, we'll call that the fun, heavy lifting piece is now gone. You get to go in and work with the stuff that makes the most sense to get your work done. And then in the systems, when you take that through automation world of things being able to collect information for 7 different places, you've got the manifest there, how to connect to it, where the entry points are, what data comes back, how to work with it. That's amazing how that has morphed from what it used to be.
Yeah, and I think the neatest aspect of it too is that the new cloud native version is you can deploy that side by side with our latest legacy version. So if you are on version 20 with the latest hotfix, you can deploy the API container and run them side by side. So you can continue to do your traditional business, but then if you want a precursor into what that new API is going to look like, you can install it, connect it to your database, and it'll allow you to interact with the API and do what you need to do.
Pro forma view of the new version?
The idea when I was kind of going through the process of how do we do this technology uplift, the idea was get it into the hands of the customer as quick as you can so that they can kind of see it and kind of slowly assimilate it.
Not a big
and then
bang. Hey, here it is.
Yeah.
Here's a magic button.
Not
Here's
a rip
big,
and replace.
Here's a big, huge upgrade or conversion project.
Yeah, it's more of a
phased deployment. Let's get
so you'll get
with it.
You'll get the REST API, and then behind that you'll get the new UX that you can install side by side, and then behind that you'll get the new pipeline, and then behind that you'll get the new billing server.
And it's pretty cool. I didn't know this. I should have known this. I apologize.
And then once you get that last component in, then your legacy application can go away.
Can fade away. So it's not a big bang cutover.
No.
We don't. It's a gradual evolution, and when you're ready,
let's be honest. Customers groan when you tell them, "Oh, you got to go through an upgrade." Oh, that's going to take forever. It's going to be a year.
Takes a year to get an upgrade approved.
Wow.
Sometimes 2.
Yeah. So this way it's less. I mean, there's still a level of transition, but at least it's manageable over time and less expensive because you're able to go at your pace rather than you having to drink from a fire hose and get it all at once. Yeah. This is a little bit more manageable.
If I put on my customer advocate hat, this is what I'm hearing so far, is that there is this new promised land, right, with AI and with all of this serverless and cloud native that eventually should mean that the support costs and the infrastructure costs and the development costs should be reduced.
Yes, and your licensing costs.
Now, you still got to spend a lot of time and money to get to that version, right? But once you kind of get over that hump, theoretically, right, you should see a reduction in total cost. Now, I'm sure something else will come up, some new thing will happen, but that's where it sits right now, is what I hear. And what I really like is that you're suggesting a phased introduction into this newer technology, that it's not the Big Bang Theory. It's not a big, what do we call that in the old conversion world? a hard cut, or what was it that we used to call when we did all those
Do a
conversions?
migration on the
No, flash cut. It's not a flash cut, right? So flash cut is no longer there. So it's really a gradual adoption and introduction.
And you can go as fast or as slow as you want to. You can install it, kind of let your developers kind of play around with it, figure it out, and things like that. And then that gives them an opportunity to assess, if there were any customizations done, on top of, that they did themselves.
They can layer that in, right?
Yeah, and that gives them more time to kind of figure out how to do that.
So when you say the parallel piece with that, with the new UI, UX, the rest, the infrastructure behind it as far as the data is the same.
Yeah.
So you're built on the same data foundation.
Correct.
Now you're using the new tool sets, the flexibility to use that, the automation pieces that come up with the new software and the releases. So it's not that heavy lift on the back office side.
Yeah.
But you get a chance to learn the new functionality, integrate that in, and take advantage of it as soon as possible.
Yes.
And learn at your own pace.
Yes. And the neat thing is as any new additional functionality that comes out in Edge 21, it may not be available in the legacy product, but there will be. We'll integrate in the hotfix structure so that when it'll be backward compatible. So if there's a new feature or something we got to change or anything like that, it will still allow it to work with the legacy application.
Very cool. So how we doing?
We've hit our time limit.
We're
We
overboard.
should go ahead and because this has been a great conversation.
It has.
But we've hit our maximum time limit for our podcast.
All right.
So I think we should probably wrap it up with
I think
thoughts from everybody.
Well, first of all, Arthur is a freshly minted pilot, and I'm hoping that he will take me, Brian, maybe to be determined, to our customers. We can go fly to go talk about this, forward, backward compatible, serverless. This is where it's going. That's illuminating for me. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How about you, Arthur? What do you got?
Well, thanks for having me on. I've been very interested and excited to watch all the podcasts that you have. So it's kind of exciting to be on one this time. So
We're glad to have you on here on Revenue Uncoded.
Coded. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Everybody.